Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to this amazing live stream from the In Learning Partnership, all about the 2022 year in review and reflecting on the essential relationships that make teaching so powerful. The In Learning Partnership is a collaboration between the Indiana Department of Education, Five Stars Learning Lab, and Keep Indiana Learning from the Central Indiana Educational Service Center. And we're thrilled to have two partners with us, Abby Brockman and Bo Gibson. These learning partners are so much fun to listen to. We're thrilled to have Bo Gibson as one of our Keep Indiana Learning digital learning coaches. And the Powerhouse team is so exciting because not only are they not even in the same school district, but they work in totally different spheres. And so the collaboration that they showcase is so powerful. Bo, Abby, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, so I'm going to just go ahead and bring this up and let you take it away.
All right. So we're going to talk about an engineering and ELA kind of cross-curricular partnership. A little bit about me. So I'm a STEM teacher. I teach a little bit of everything, math, physics, engineering. I've taught pretty much every math class there is from 7 through 12. I teach several PLTW classes, Principles of Engineering, Introduction to Engineering and Design, Computer Integrated Manufacturing, Engineering Design and Development. There's a bunch of them, and they all have about 20 syllables each. And then also teach dual credit physics. So I've been doing it for about 10 years. I am additive manufacturing certified. We do a ton of additive manufacturing in my engineering classes. Actually, in some of my math and physics as well, we incorporate some additive manufacturing. Recently, in the last couple of years, moved to a new position from when this project with me and Abby kind of came about. So now I'm at Lagodi, and I am a director of their student-run business line manufacturing. So that's been eating up a lot of my time as of late. So I'll pass it over to Abby, let her introduce herself.
Well, thanks, Bo. My name is Abby Brockman, and currently I am teaching English language arts to 7th and 8th grade. I also have the privilege of being in the high school library, which is just time that I find I love. I've been teaching for about 13 years in various settings and locations. Really love it here at Perry Central. And I am also a board member of Valley Watch, which is a local environmental group. And that's kind of where this whole idea started between Bo's classes and myself and kind of the community at large. So we'll kind of introduce the problem, if you will, that I started with and approached Bo with. So we've got, as Valley Watch, we won a lawsuit, and we got a lot of air monitors to try to make sure that the valley air is clean. And these monitors, as you can see on the screen, are pretty small, but they have a lot of requirements for being kept outdoors and where they can function for a long time. So I was thinking, how are we going to get these houses made? The company does offer some, but they were extremely expensive. And I knew that we had 3D printing in the building. And I knew that there was a whole slew of other things that people down in the ag building can do that I didn't have a clue about. So I approached Bo with kind of a problem. Like, how can we make a housing unit for these expensive air monitors where they are protected from direct sunlight? They cannot get wet. They have to be connected to power at all times. They also have to be connected to Wi-Fi at all times. And the sensor that collects the samples of air is in a very inconvenient spot. So I kind of threw all that on Bo and said, see what you guys can come up with.
All right. So yeah, then once Abby kind of served as our liaison between the Valley Watch group and the students, my classes and then some of the manufacturing classes kind of took it over. There was one other teacher involved that's not with us today, Josh Craney. He does great at Perry Central's manufacturing. And he kind of helped us as well. So I'll talk us through a little bit of what each class did and their responsibility and their roles. And I taught some of these, Josh taught some of these. And like I said, Abby kind of served as the liaison, kind of held the whole project together. It was the kind of the glue that held us together, I guess.
Thank you for that.
So my IED class, which if you are not in the know with PLTW, Project Lead the Way, is a freshman level, maybe sophomore level class. There's a lot of CAD design going on in that class. So those students were the ones that actually designed the housing unit and drew up the CAD plans. And basically they kind of started us off. They made a CAD model in the computer. They had an assembly, put it all together virtually before we manufactured anything. And then they passed it on to the engineering, design, and development class. That is where I do a lot of my additive manufacturing, or where I did a lot of my additive manufacturing. And so any of the pieces that needed 3D printed was done in that class. So the EDD kids were kind of the fabricators, the digital fabricators. And you can see on that prototype, it kind of consists of several different things. They've kind of got those black flaps on the top. Those were 3D printed. Those white little notches at the top were also 3D printed, and the frame itself was 3D printed. So the EDD kids were actually in charge of that production, and they're also in charge of setting a price. So the IED kids, the Introduction to Engineering Design kids, priced it all out. They have a bill of materials from their CAD models, and they knew the material costs, and they were the ones that kind of set the pricing. But the EDD was who really produced it. And then the Commodore Manufacturing kind of did everything else. So Commodore Manufacturing at Perry Central, which I guess is under the direction of Josh Craney, he does a great job. They run our laser cutter. They run any sort of our metal cutting, metal fabrication. So those tops are actually sheet metal. And so the manufacturing students cut the fronts, which it's kind of hard to see in the picture, but those are plexiglass fronts, and they have circles cut out so that there's enhanced airflow. But they cut the metal, and they also cut the acrylic plexiglass fronts there. So we had all three classes chipping in, and they were all kind of going back and forth. IED was passing plans on to both EDD and the Commodore Manufacturing. They were doing the fabrication, and then actually the assembly went back to the IED kids. And so I had a class full of freshmen and sophomores actually assembling these things. So it was kind of just a group effort between those three mainly, like I said, and then Abby was kind of serving as our liaison, and we would kind of produce plans and CAD models and physical models and prototypes. And she would kind of pass them on to the Valley Watch group, and they would kind of give us some feedback. And of course we'd have to revise and redesign and say, oh yeah, we like this, we don't like that, we need more airflow, et cetera, et cetera.
Right, you worked so hard on this, but here's what we need you to fix.
Yeah, thank you, but it stinks, and we're going to need it.
No. It was a continuous improvement kind of project, and it was so cool to see those kids come back with an updated version. But it was not an easy project for anybody to do, let alone high school kids, and then let alone kids from 3 separate classes. Like it was amazing. Yeah,
it definitely was a challenge. But I think it was great for the kids to see, in a real life scenario, you're not going to just one shot get it. It's going to be a revision process. You got to take into account, the stakeholders and their wants and their needs. And so it was definitely a real world experience for them. And it was a great collaboration because obviously in the real world, you don't design and price things and fabricate things it's not all the same people. It's going to be different departments, different buildings. And that's exactly what we got with this project, which was so cool. They kind of got a real look at how the manufacturing engineering process actually works. So we were really happy with it. I think the Valley Watch group was really happy with it. We sold some units. And this happened at the last quarter. It was, kind of spring breakish time. It seems like whenever this thing really took off, and then even, kind of into May, when this was really kind of getting hot and heavy. So like I said earlier, I did end up leaving the corporation. It says it was untimely departure. I wasn't fired or anything, I just left. I was closer to home. Lagodi was a little bit closer to home. So I was just trying to shorten my commute. I don't want to give a bad vibe here. But anyway, that's my story and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah.
But no, so we had some ideas about how we could extend this to even more classes because, like we said, the Valley Watch group was pretty happy with what they saw and what they got. You can see in the picture what our final design looks a little bit more polished than what you saw on the prototype. And so we had some plans. We didn't get to follow through with them, but I do want to talk about them because, on these cross-curricular partnerships, to me, the more people we can get involved, the better. The more classes, the more students we can expose to these real-world, authentic learning experiences, obviously, it just kind of gives them more stake in their education and kind of lets them realize what they're doing actually is important. It does matter. And so we'll go through just a few ideas that we had, how we can extend this, how we could have had stuck around for a little bit. So on my end, from the engineering and manufacturing, of course, we could continue our production. And I would have encouraged my students to find a way to reduce material costs. I will say I was not entirely satisfied. I think we used a lot more plastic than what we needed to. But again, the design was done by freshmen and sophomores. They had never really designed something for a customer before. So I think they did a really, really good job, first of all. But if we would have continued to develop, I would have liked to have seen them maybe be a little bit more efficient with material use. So that would be something that we would continue to do. And of course, the manufacturing classes would also have continued production on the sheet metal and the plexiglass, which I think we took the plexiglass out to take the picture, but we still did decide to have a plexiglass front so you could see the monitor and what the monitor, or see the screen and see what it was kind of putting out to us. Also, from a marketing, we have a business and marketing kind of, I don't want to say pathway, but we have a few business and marketing classes. I guess we do have a business and marketing pathway at Perry Central. So anyway, we were hoping that we could pass some of that off to them and let them come up with some advertisements. We figured that if the Valley Watch group, was happy enough with our design and our housing unit, there would probably be other groups out there looking for cheap, inexpensive ways to, house these air quality monitors. So we were hoping to get that going. Also, these monitors give us all sorts of good data about our air, a lot of numerical data. And we were hoping, since I'm also a math teacher, that we could also incorporate that into some sort of math and statistics and, kind of do some sort of statistical analysis and breakdown and include that in those classes as well. And then Abby, talk to us about from your end what you were thinking.
Right. Well, from the the health environmental standpoint, I was wanting to go to our health sciences class here, and we've got some kiddos that are in basically training to get their CNA license. So I thought, how cool would it be if they could learn about the effects or potential effects of, poor air quality, what that does to the body systems, and then maybe even to do some outreach and teach the community about air quality and what these monitors mean, show them how to get onto this app, because it goes through a worldwide available app called Air Visual. So this data is really, really important. And to be able to have our kids teach it to other people that live near the monitors, I think would just be really empowering. And to go along with that, I thought, well, ELA, why can't we make some brochures or just some informational, even like podcasts, and kind of get that out there to the community? So it's more just about bringing it awareness, I guess you could say, and education to a bigger audience. I thought that would be, and it's still a possibility, obviously, just kind of still on the table.
So looking back, this project was done, we started it a couple years ago. So, had some time to reflect and think about, what went right, what went wrong. So we've already touched on this first bullet point here. Anytime we bring in multiple stakeholders, I'm thinking of myself, Abby, the Valley Watch group, everyone kind of had a stake in what was going on. And there's obviously going to be multiple inputs, multiple iterations. And so if you're going to plan a project like this, or you find a project like this kind of falling into your lap, you just got to be prepared for that. There's going to be back and forth. The first go around's probably not going to do it. And from a teacher's perspective, I knew that going in. I knew, these freshmen are not going to just knock it out of the ballpark on the very first go around. Not saying anything bad against them. It's just, how it goes. But making sure the students are prepared, I think is important, so that it's easy sometimes for students to get down if it comes back and they're like, yeah, we need to change quite a bit.
I might have said that a couple times.
Yeah. But you just got to be prepared and say, hey, that's the way it goes. These are the people we're creating for. So if that's what they want, that's what they get. The customer's always right, and we'll just go and we'll redesign. And that's why we do it on the computer first, so we can make changes easily.
Yeah.
Another thing that I really think is empowering. I really do like bringing in projects where multiple classes are involved, because students really do love seeing their work in other classrooms. I have several students that are in the manufacturing realm, but also kind of in the engineering realm. And also they're in that business marketing realm, but we bring them into Commodore manufacturing because we need some sort of social media presence and advertising presence. And, every single time that they come in and every time they saw an air house, they're like, hey, maybe it's a manufacturing kit. Hey, I cut the tops for those, or hey, I was the one that was running the laser cutter for that. And students really love seeing that. And so I just think it's a great way. It's an easy way to get student buy-in, because when they're constantly seeing, their work show up all across the school, they're just going to be more involved. They're going to be more engaged, and they're going to feel connected, maybe in a way that they wouldn't have otherwise been connected. So.
Right. And I think, we got a lot of the kids following the app. They're following the monitor here at Perry Central that, I'll tell you, Bo, it is still functioning beautifully outside, south facing. And even still, it's been protected just fine, which is just really impressive. But yeah, to see the kids on the app checking the air quality, like especially when they have football practice in the summer, they're kind of aware that, like, oh, this might be a day where I kind of need to take it easy a little bit. And then, how do you know that? Well, I have this air quality monitoring app. Oh, yeah, that thing out front that I helped build? Like, it's just really cool to hear that. And then also just the connection with the community, I think, and just the overall health and well-being of, the neighbors around here. It's just really, it brings education to the real world.
And just to kind of piggyback on that point, I think that's a really important thing, is when the students can get connected with the community and the community can get connected to the students. Again, you have that sense of kind of togetherness, and you get some buy-in, I think, from students that maybe otherwise wouldn't have really bought in whenever they see members from the community are actually involved with stuff that they're doing in school, and vice versa. So,
right.
So some tips and tricks. Like I said, I try to take on projects like this as much as I can, because I really do think these sorts of learning experiences are great for kids. I think it really is what's best for students, even if it does sometimes put a little more work on teachers. And so here's some tips and tricks. And I think we said, Abby, you were going to start us off here, so go ahead.
Right. And I just have to say that this was my first experience doing a project like this. And the fact that I had, Bo as the person that was my go-to for all these different classes, I think I was really kind of spoiled when it comes to communication, because he or his students were like, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but they're like constantly coming in and they were showing me, they wouldn't just say, so we did some change. Like, they had the model in their hands and they were able to articulate what it is that they did, and they had questions for me. I could answer them, and then they're like, okay, we got it. And then they would go out and come back. Like, so that was great. And it would be really difficult if the communication was lacking. But, like I said, I was fortunate enough I don't know what that feels like, but I have a feeling it would make things much more difficult. So communication, just amongst even Bo, myself, and then I was the liaison between him and Valley Watch. So I was obviously in contact with the president of that nonprofit, but it would be really difficult if we didn't have that aspect. But the communication is key. Yeah. And I think the students saw that too. Like, they picked up on it, and they knew how important that was. Because there was a time, we didn't want to keep John waiting too long for his air monitor houses. Like, we kind of we couldn't mess around. So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm going to just kind of reiterate that. Yeah. But we had 3 teachers involved, and we had the Valley Watch group. We really did have to stay in constant communication. I tried to have a few student leaders that kind of served as my communicators. Of course, emails work too, but like Abby said, there's something to be said for actually having the model in hand and having your previous iteration and your current iteration and be like, okay, this is what we had. This is what we have now. What do you think? What do we need to change? If you need to take a picture to send it to the Valley Watch, or you just want to take it physically,
Right.
That's really great. And you really do have to communicate, because there's just so many moving pieces in a project like this. If you're not in that constant communication mode, things can kind of get out of whack in a hurry. So I really do want to iterate. Yeah. Communication is key. Let the projects be student driven. That's our next bullet point here. And I think, again, that's, to me, a very important aspect of a project like this. If I'm going to try to bring an authentic learning experience into my classroom, I want the students to drive that as much as possible, because of course that's going to increase buy-in. So in this project, each class that I managed had kind of a student leader, or at least a small group of student leaders. So our IED class, there was about, I want to say, 4 students that was kind of the managers, that was all in charge of a certain thing. So maybe one person was in charge of the pricing, and they had 3 or 4 students in their group, and somebody was maybe in charge of the bill of materials, and they were in overseeing a few people. And then the one person maybe was in charge of the CAD design. And then, like Abby mentioned, I did have somebody from my EDD class that was kind of my all-time communicator, secretary. She took care of the communication. She took care of money things, as far as processing that, getting that down to our treasurer, making sure things got kind of where they needed to be in that role. And of course, I didn't necessarily oversee the Commodore manufacturing. That was, like we said, the teacher that isn't with us right now. But he has a similar setup where he's got kind of some student leaders, and they kind of facilitated communication with me whenever I needed something. So, letting that project be student led is, to me, a really important aspect of a project like this. And kind of rolling into our next point there, I think also letting everyone know their role in the project is important up front. So whenever I kind of saw what my IED kids were coming up with, and we kind of had a little bit of a game plan, I immediately got in contact with Commodore Manufacturing, and let them know, hey, this is what we're going to need. Can you do this for us? And once they said, yeah, we could, then I said, okay, well, now you're in charge of that. So, I'm going to put that on you, and we're not going to worry about it. So once they knew they were cutting the plexiglass and the tops, like, that was their role. Like, I was no longer going to kind of micromanage that. I was just going to say, hey, we need 20 of these by next week. So, get them to us. And
you're making me feel bad right now, Bo, for the amount of facilitation that you had to do. That, I mean, it was so smooth. I didn't really realize the scope that you I'm sorry, but thank you.
Well, like I said, sometimes it takes a little.
Yeah, it's a lot, but man, it went so smoothly. And that's awesome. The dividing up of, roles within a class and then among classes, like, well done.
You bring that up, but you also got to remember, when students are driving the project and they're all invested, I'm really not spending 47 minutes micromanaging students. They're doing their thing, and that gives me time to communicate.
Right.
And so that, to me, again, these authentic learning projects, these real world projects, you do invest. The role of the teacher kind of shifts. Instead of being up in front of the board and spending 47 minutes lecturing, I'm making sure students are on task, but for the most part they are. And so I can spend that time communicating, getting with whoever else is involved in the project, and making sure everybody's still on the same page and we're all going smoothly.
Well, you make it look easy.
And so I think that leads us to our next point here, where, these projects, you don't know where they're going to go. These cross-curricular and authentic real world projects, you really don't. You can kind of have a start. But don't let that stop you. I think they're so important to the students and student learning to let them see that learning isn't just, it's not discrete, right? It's not like a math class and then a science class and then a business class. In the real world, that they all merge and they all come together, they all work together, and these projects are essential to showing them that. So you kind of just got to be flexible and you got to roll with the punches, and hopefully you do have a few good educators with you that can help manage these projects, kind of like what we had, during this project. Without Abby serving in her role, me serving in mine, and then Josh in his, this wouldn't have happened. It took all hands on deck. And of course, we've already talked about how many iterations this happened, or how many iterations it took, and how much back and forth. We had to be flexible, and we had to kind of think on our feet a few times. But like I said, it's the nature of the beast. You can't pre-plan and take care of everything. You just got to jump in with both feet and be ready to roll with the punches a little bit.
Right. And I think we got some kids interested in some things that they may not have even considered before. So that's really cool to see too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for sure, there's definitely students there now that understand the importance of monitoring these sorts of pollutants that could be in our air, these sort of toxins that, I know because I know those students, they wouldn't have been thinking about that before.
No.
And so we definitely expose them to things that, they definitely wouldn't have considered.
Yeah.
So, all right. So I think that kind of wraps up what we have to say about this project. So we're back to Lena, I think.
Well, this has been so fascinating to me. So I was a school librarian as well, Abby, for 15 years in high school. And I loved collaborative projects like this. And I thought it was so authentic when you said, "Oh, Bo, I didn't realize how much facilitation." Because when it's done well, it's like a duck across the water, right? Smooth sailing, but you don't see how much churning it takes to get that move. And it's so authentic to work together, and many hands makes for light work. And when the students see authentic experts in multiple areas that are all working together, they start to connect the dots too, that this is not just something that happens in Bo's class. This is not just a way that I think when I'm in an engineering class. It's a way that I think when I'm going across the hall and into new places. And I think that flexible, nimble thinking is what can come from a true learning partner. Thank you both so much. And thanks everyone for watching. The In-Learning Partnership is thrilled to have you here. We would love to hear your stories and celebrate your learning partners. Hashtag In-Learning Partner will allow us to find those tweets and posts on LinkedIn and Facebook and wherever you're putting out the good messages that you're working with this weekend across all of your classrooms. We would love to hear about it. Thanks everyone for joining us today. And thanks for Bo and Abby spending some time with us this afternoon.